guys. So I'm going to go through and teach you guys real quick on the home front, and this also includes Japanese internment as well. So I'm trying to do this big screen, and I know you got to see me in the corner. So this really won't take very long, but we'll just try to push through this and get going. Let's see if it'll let me. There we go. Okay. All right. So you can just see some of the pictures. This is, of course, soldiers leaving, and you can just kind of get an idea what that was like for the people that were still staying home. You had women, children, they had to stay at home. This is just another image where you can see, a wife hugging her husband goodbye and the little boy tugging at his pants leg. This was not easy for anyone who was going through that, knowing or not knowing when they would see their dad or husband again. So basically, I'm just going to go through some of the things. This is like your need to knows, okay? You had what was called the War Production Board. And what they did was they would oversee transition to a wartime economy, war mobilization. Let's see if she's going to pop up. There she is. There's Rosie. If we were in my room in 207, you could see my Rosie the Riveter picture, but we're not. So there she is. But anyway, so you had a wartime economy. Guys, we're kind of seeing this right now. I don't know if you watched the news yesterday, the press conference, but a lot of businesses are switching over to a wartime economy. Basically what they're doing, because they're considering the whole coronavirus thing just like a war. And they are transitioning their factories and stuff into doing things like making masks and like the certain kind of hospital garb, whatever, that they have a certain name that I don't know. I don't do medical stuff. But they are transitioning their factories into, say they were making pillows or underwear, and now they're making masks or the gowns or whatever that are needed. So that's part of war mobilization. That's part of, there's a need and the companies are stepping up and then they're doing that. So that's basically what was going on at this point in time as well. But you have Rosie the Riveter. She was a symbol. She was based on somebody, but she became an iconic symbol. I love my Rosie the Riveter picture. And she's just super cool anyway. But the female workers that went into the factories, and there's a great scene, if you guys can get to it, on if you have Amazon Prime and you can watch The Story of Us on World War II, there's a great scene with a factory where they're creating they're making munitions and stuff, and it's the women. But anyways, I can't find it on YouTube or I would have posted it. So anyways, this is just really cool scene, and you can see just what all the women were doing. Oh, and A League of Their Own is a great movie to watch about women taking the place of the baseball players during that time. That was cool too. Okay, so during this time you had $100 billion. That's a lot. We're looking at coronavirus with the stimulus package, like trillions, but there you had $100 billion in government contracts, and they were awarded to private industry. Okay, so it's like, this is sort of like what I had explained, what happened in 2008 with a lot of construction and stuff whenever the bubble burst with real estate and everything. And a lot of times it was those government buildings, those government contracts that kept businesses afloat. I had used my husband's business as an example. If it wasn't for some of those government contracts, their private company wouldn't have made it. And so it's a similar situation here, where you have all these government contracts. They're awarded to private industry, where it's like, hey, we need you to make, different things that are all for the war effort. Okay. And so the Office of War Mobilization, they were created to oversee the allocation of materials, of manpower. They supervised the production, the War Production Board, and all those wartime agencies. Okay. So those are just some of your vocabulary that you need to be aware of. Okay, so rationing, it was very much all hands on deck. It just feels very ironic teaching this with what we're going through right now. Because you guys are seeing, if you go into the grocery store, say, like, I went into Publix, and you can only get two packs of meat, or 2 packs of frozen veggies, or whatever it is that they have limited. So there are limitations right now that we're experiencing. Hello, toilet paper, big shortage. Okay, so which I still can't figure that one out. But anyways, basically the War Production Board, they would limit the availability of essential items because everything had to be for the war effort. Everything, if it needed to go to the soldiers, they had to make sure that the soldiers were being fed, things like that. And so people would actually come up, and this is part of your Homefront little assignment. People would have victory gardens, so that they could help feed soldiers and things like that. But anyways, you would have like a ration coupon book type thing. And you would have ration coupons. And so like you had to have the coupon to get the meats and the sugar and coffee, canned goods, things like that, fuel, even nylons. If you look in the picture, what she's doing is, because nylons, that's like pantyhose, tights. Okay. They would have like a little line up the back. And so they couldn't wear the nylons. They had to go like bare legged. And so they would literally draw the line up the back of their leg to make it look like they had on nylons. So just kind of a fun little fact on that one. But anyways, they had to have ration coupons. Okay. So like I said, it's kind of similar in a way. You could look at like, we are being limited in, how much we can get at the grocery stores, just because we're kind of in a little bit of a global pandemic right now, and it's affecting everything. Okay. So how do you get people to go along with this? Well, that's where propaganda comes into play. So you had the Office of War Information, and they created posters and newsreels and radio programs, and it was all to boost the war effort. They wanted to promote conservation, so like conserving items. They would have like metal drives and rubber drives, and just all kinds of stuff, just to help conserve everything, because everything had to go towards the war effort. Everybody's focused on that. And so to get people, to go along with it, they would have like posters and stuff like that. Y'all, there were cartoons, even like Dr. Seuss got in on it. Like it was everywhere. Everybody was in on it. Some of your Looney Tunes cartoons with like Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny and stuff, they were all for the war effort too. So all of this, it was literally all hands on deck. And so everybody was involved. But it was all, like I said, it was all a message to keep Americans focused on the war effort. So like this, like if you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. So, make sure you're car sharing, so it's like, conserve gas and everything else, because they had to conserve fuel. Let's catch him with his Panzers down. We will if we keep them firing. Okay. So of course, making Hitler, you got to make him look like a clown. Don't let that shadow touch them. If you notice the shadow, it is a swastika. Okay. So, and they're holding little American flags. And so trying to keep the very Americana thing going, and it's the kids. Okay. Whenever you use kids, that's still propaganda. Okay. They're trying to tug at your heartstrings. Okay. So they want you to buy war bonds. That was mainly businesses and stuff that did that at this time, but still war bonds were purchased to help with the war effort. Let's see. So caricatures of Japanese people and Germans and stuff like that were very popular as part of propaganda. And so like, trying to encourage people not to take any days off, to keep working and stuff. That's a Texaco poster there. And then this one's kind of funny. If you're giving it up, you're going steady with Hitler. So stay pure, save it for marriage. So that, even the abstinence, there's a coalition for abstinence education. So they were like, basically don't be having babies right now. Okay. And Y'all know how I feel about that. No Corona babies. Okay. All right. We're moving on. Okay. So African Americans we looked at women as far as like they would be considered a minority group and how they worked in like the factories and stuff like that. They stepped it up. Well, African Americans played a role as well. There was still segregated units, and they still faced continued discrimination. They were denied a lot of defense jobs, and that was a lot of the new jobs. Okay, because remember, we're coming out of the Depression, and this is really what brings us out, is because all these jobs now are needed, and you have all these businesses and stuff that are now needed, and so that brings us out of the Depression. And so a lot of the African American leaders, they were worried that a lot of the African Americans would be excluded from getting some of these new jobs. And so you had people like this guy. This is A. Philip Randolph. And he wanted to organize, and his plan was to organize a march on Washington. And we've seen marches on Washington, since then. But FDR kind of put that down. He was worried about a race riot because DC was still segregated. He's like on the eve of war here, everything has to be focused on the war. And so he steps in, FDR does, and he issues an executive order, and it prohibits discrimination on government contracted jobs. Okay. So this is like, it was a win there because the African Americans couldn't be discriminated against with some of those new jobs and stuff that were coming in. All right. So with the whole thing with Japanese internment camps and things like that, you got to keep in mind Pearl Harbor. Okay. Who's the one that came and bombed Pearl Harbor? That was the Japanese. And so there is a lot of fear and racism and stuff that pops up with the Japanese Americans. We had already seen with Asian Americans how they had been treated in the past, like with Chinese exclusion and things like that. Now we're seeing it still with the Japanese and, the whole Pearl Harbor thing. So this is common of what you would have seen. Japs keep moving. This is a white man's neighborhood. Don't say Japs. I was just reading that. Okay. And then once again, we don't want any Japs back here ever. So, there was just all kinds of racist, stuff going on with the Japanese at this point in time. Like I said, even Dr. Seuss got in on it. Yeah. Even this. Okay. If you look at it, it's California, it's the West Coast. Okay. Because there's Oregon, Washington. And it says waiting for the signal from home. And you can see like they're being handed TNT. And so it's this fear. The whole thing stemmed from fear that all the Japanese Americans that are living on the West Coast, they're all in cahoots with the people back home, and they want to hurt everybody and blow everybody up. And so you get Executive Order 9066. And FDR issues this in 42. So basically it creates military camps in the West. You have camps like Manzanar, and they're relocated to internment camps. And so this is, here you go, instructions to all persons of Japanese ancestry living in the following areas. You could have had Japanese families that had been here for generations, and they still would have been relocated. They did allow them to work or to enlist, and a lot of Japanese Americans did that to kind of prove, like, hello, I'm American, and I'm for America, that kind of thing. But still, there was a lot of y'all saw that in the Pearl Harbor. Right after the bombing, like whenever the Asian doctor was trying to help one of the wounded soldiers, and he was yelling at him, and it was because of that. Okay. And so basically, like I said, it was fear that the Japanese on the West Coast, they would commit these acts of sabotage. That's sort of like what the Dr. Seuss cartoon was portraying. Most Japanese Americans, they had to sell their property and their belongings. And it was very like quick, like, okay, you're going to have to move. So now, okay. So they would have very little time to move. they would be set. I'm going to show you some pictures in a second, but the families, they would have to live in like wooden barracks. They would be surrounded by barbed wire. And just kind of to contrast, there was only a few German and Italian Americans that actually were interned or subject to that. You could say it's because of, it was Japan that bombed Pearl Harbor, or maybe some other reason. So, but that's just the way it was. So here's a family that's having to move, little kids. This is before and after. So like before, you can see there's like regular white American kids and stuff with Japanese American kids. And then after, you have not as many. There they are leaving. You have soldiers, remember it's military. This is some of the drawings. It shows you like the wooden barracks. You have like a mess hall and stuff like that. All right, so just kind of summing that up. Japanese Americans that were on the West Coast, that too was affected. Most of them were American citizens, and about 120,000 were imprisoned until 1945. So that's a while. Here's some of the pictures, what it looked like. Like I said, the wooden barracks. More just paintings. They did play baseball. Baseball's always been America's pastime. It still should be, but football's taken over. Once again, let's see, that's Manzanar. And then you can see some kids with the barbed wire. And I think that's my last picture. It is. Okay, so that wraps that up. So that's Homefront. That is Japanese internment. You have a couple of assignments for those. I'm getting this one posted quick. And if you guys have any questions, let me know. Bye.